My name is Haley Mason, and at 28 years old, I never expected to be standing in the cold November air after being kicked out of my family's Thanksgiving dinner. What my status-obsessed father and the rest of my family didn't know when they showed me the door was that I was worth $94 million. The startup I'd built from nothing, the one they dismissed as my little computer hobby, had made me wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. As I drove away that night, I made a decision that would rock their world. I blocked their access to accounts they didn't even know I was supporting. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, stick around. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy family karma stories as satisfying as pumpkin pie. Growing up in Wellesley, an affluent Boston suburb, our family appeared picture-perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style home with its manicured lawn and luxury cars in the driveway projected exactly the image my parents wanted. My father, Richard Mason, built his reputation as a cutthroat investment banker who valued achievement above all else. His imposing presence filled any room he entered, his salt and pepper hair always perfectly styled, his custom suits impeccable. He measured success in dollar signs and status symbols, collecting country club memberships and business connections like trophies. My mother, Diane, complimented him perfectly. A former beauty queen turned socialite, she orchestrated our family's social calendar with military precision. Charity galas, tennis club luncheons, and dinner parties were her battlefield, and she never lost a social skirmish. With her highlighted blonde hair, tennis-stoned figure, and perpetual string of pearls, she was the quintessential banker's wife. Her greatest accomplishment, as she often reminded us, was marrying well and maintaining appearances. In this carefully cultivated garden of success, my older brother Tyler bloomed as the golden child. For years my senior, he mirrored our father in every way that mattered: captain of the lacrosse team, Ivy League business school graduate, and eventually, associate at our father's firm. Dad beamed with pride at Tyler's every accomplishment, already grooming him to take over the family business someday. My younger sister Brooke, just 2 years behind me, was Mother's perfect project. With her natural beauty and social grace, she effortlessly collected pageant crowns and popularity. Mother invested countless hours perfecting Brooke's poise, fashion sense, and ability to charm anyone of importance. By 18, Brooke had been featured in Boston Magazine's debutante issue and had college boys from good families lining up for a chance to date her. And then there was me, sandwiched awkwardly between these two paragons of Mason family values. From an early age, I gravitated toward books instead of social events, computers instead of cosmetics. I was the quiet, studious middle child who preferred coding to cocktail parties. My bedroom wasn't decorated with sports trophies like Tyler's or pageant crowns like Brooke's. Instead, I had disassembled computer parts, programming books, and science fair medals that no one ever mentioned at family gatherings. "Haley, darling, why don't you put down that computer and join us? The Preston's son is visiting from Princeton," my mother would say, her smile tight with disappointment. When I'd explain I was working on a new program, she'd sigh dramatically. "You can play with your little games later. Social connections are what matter in life." My father was more direct in his dismissal. When I won the state science competition in 10th grade, he glanced at my award and said, "That's nice, but is it going to get you into Harvard Business School?" The following weekend, he missed my regional technology showcase to attend Tyler's golf tournament. "Your brother is networking with future business leaders," he explained when I mentioned his absence. That's real-world success. Even Thanksgiving dinners became showcases for the family hierarchy. While Tyler would be asked detailed questions about market trends and Brooke would be praised for her latest social conquest, I'd be relegated to passing dishes and receiving the occasional pat on the head. "Haley's doing well in her math classes," my mother would offer vaguely when relatives asked about me, quickly pivoting to Tyler's summer internship or Brooke's latest modeling opportunity. I learned early to keep my achievements private. When I taught myself Java and Python by 14, I celebrated alone. When my app won a national coding competition in high school, I quietly added the certificate to my growing collection, never mentioning it at dinner. My passion became my secret world, one where logic mattered more than appearances, where solutions were valued over social status. The pattern continued through high school, where I graduated as valedictorian, an achievement downplayed at my graduation party, which somehow evolved into a pre-college celebration for Tyler instead. "Your brother's entering the business world," my father announced proudly, champagne glass raised. "He'll be making the Mason name proud on Wall Street while building real connections." The implied comparison hung in the air, clear as crystal. My academic achievement was nice, but ultimately insignificant in the Mason family value system. College selection brought the family dynamics into sharp relief. Tyler had attended my father's alma mater, Dartmouth, with a generous donation from Dad ensuring his place despite middling grades. Brooke chose Vassar, where Mother had connections through her alumni network. When I received a full academic scholarship to MIT for computer science, my parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "MIT is so technical," my mother said with a slight grimace. "What about somewhere more well-rounded? Connections matter more than grades in the real world." My father was blunter. "Computer science? What kind of career path is that for a Mason? You could do business or law and actually make something of yourself." Despite their objections, I chose MIT, partly because it was my dream school and partly because the scholarship meant financial independence. For the first time, I wouldn't need to rely on the family money that always came with strings attached. While Tyler's education and Brooke's various endeavors were fully funded with no questions asked, I worked part-time jobs throughout college to cover my living expenses, determined to stand on my own. Those college years marked the beginning of my true separation from the family. While I came home for major holidays, the distance grew, not just geographically but emotionally. In Boston, surrounded by fellow tech enthusiasts who valued innovation and intelligence, I finally found my people. My roommate, Alicia, became the first person who truly supported my passion without qualification. "You're not just good at this, Haley," she told me after seeing one of my projects. "You're brilliant at it." My professors noticed too. Dr. Ramirez, my advanced algorithms professor, pulled me aside after class one day during junior year. "Mason, that security protocol you developed has real-world applications. Have you considered where you might take this after graduation?" I graduated summa cum laude from MIT, with job offers from several major tech companies. My graduation ceremony told the story of my family perfectly. My parents and siblings arrived late, left early for Brooke's friend's engagement party, and asked more questions about the catering than my thesis project or job prospects. As we posed for a quick family photo, my father glanced at his watch impatiently. "Well, at least you've finished," he said, checking his email on his phone. "Now you can look for a proper position at a respected firm. I have some contacts at Goldman who might take a meeting as a favor." I smiled politely, but had already made my decision. I wouldn't be following the path they'd laid out. Instead of pursuing the corporate job they expected, I had something much bigger in mind, something that would either prove them all wrong or crash and burn spectacularly. Either way, it would be my choice on my terms. "Actually," I said, gathering my courage, "I'm going to start my own tech company." The look of confused disappointment on my father's face would fuel my determination for years to come. The summer after graduation, while my MIT classmates accepted lucrative positions at Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Cambridge with barely enough space for a bed and desk. The apartment's single window overlooked a brick wall, and the radiator clanked through the night, but the rent was manageable on my limited savings. This would be the headquarters for what I hoped would become my tech empire, or at least a sustainable business. My parents' reaction to my decision was predictably negative. "You're turning down stable employment to do what exactly?" my father had demanded during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. When I explained my vision for advanced cybersecurity software that could protect companies from emerging threats, he scoffed. "Cybersecurity? That's a fancy term for IT work." You'll be fixing printers in 6 months when this falls apart. Those early days tested every ounce of my determination. I worked around the clock, surviving on ramen noodles and coffee, coding until my vision blurred. The prototype for my security software showed promise, but I needed a partner with complementary skills, someone who believed in the project as much as I did. I found that person in Jason Kim, a brilliant programmer I'd collaborated with on several university projects. Unlike my family, Jason immediately grasped the potential of what I was building. This adaptive threat detection algorithm is unlike anything I've seen, he said, examining my code during our first official meeting at a coffee shop we would later call our first corporate headquarters. Jason became not just a business partner, but the first person to truly validate my vision. Where my family saw a foolish post-college phase, Jason saw a revolutionary approach to network security. He invested his savings alongside mine, and together we officially founded SecureFlow, working side by side in my tiny apartment, our laptops perched on a salvage door I'd converted into a makeshift desk. Our first year was brutal. We faced rejection after rejection from potential investors who couldn't see past our youth and limited business experience. One venture capitalist actually laughed when we presented our business plan. "Come back when you've got some gray hair or a track record," he said, showing us the door 15 minutes into our presentation. We took consulting gigs to keep the lights on, working through nights and weekends on our software. There were moments I nearly broke, like when my credit card was declined buying groceries the same day Tyler called to brag about his new BMW, a birthday gift from our parents. Or when I had to miss Christmas at home because we couldn't afford the plane ticket, and my mother said, "Well, I suppose your little computer project is more important than family." 18 months into our venture, we hit a breakthrough. Our latest algorithm showed a 98.7% success rate at detecting and neutralizing advanced persistent threats before they could penetrate a system, significantly better than anything on the market. We documented the results and sent our findings to Alexis Rivera, the security director at Meridian Technologies, a mid-sized software company that had recently experienced a major data breach. Unlike previous contacts, Rivera responded within hours. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," she wrote. "Can you meet tomorrow?" That meeting changed everything. Rivera not only purchased our security package for Meridian, but connected us with her network of security professionals. "What you've built here isn't just an improvement," she told us as she signed the contract. "It's a new paradigm in threat detection." With Meridian as our first major client, doors began to open. Over the next year, we expanded from my apartment to a small office, then to a larger space as we added employees. Each success felt like vindication. When Cyber Defense magazine featured our software in their annual security roundup, I sent a copy to my parents. My father's response was tepid. "Interesting little write-up. Let me know when you're ready for a real job if this doesn't pan out." 3 years after founding SecureFlow, our client list included financial institutions, healthcare providers, and government contractors. Our team had grown to 27 people, and we were consistently profitable, a rarity for a young tech company. Jason and I had evolved from coding partners to effective executives, each finding our leadership style. Yet, even as the business flourished, I maintained a modest lifestyle. While I could have afforded luxury, I chose a comfortable but unassuming apartment and drove the same reliable Honda I'd had since college. Part of me was waiting to see if my family would ever recognize my achievement without the external trappings of success they so valued. They never did. At family gatherings, my growing business remained my computer job, always discussed with faint condescension. "Haley's still doing her tech thing," my mother would tell relatives, before quickly changing the subject to Tyler's promotion or Brooke's dating life. I stopped trying to explain the significance of our company's growth or the innovations we were pioneering. Then came the call that would transform everything. Andrea Winters, VP of Acquisitions at Securitech Global, one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the world, requested a meeting. "We've been watching SecureFlow's development with great interest," she said. "Your adaptive response protocol is years ahead of the industry." The meeting lasted 6 hours. By the end, Winters had laid out an acquisition offer, $188 million for SecureFlow, with retention packages for key team members, including Jason and me. The number was so large it seemed unreal, the kind of success even my status-obsessed family couldn't dismiss. Jason and I spent weeks performing due diligence, consulting with lawyers and financial advisors. We negotiated terms that would protect our team and ensure our technology would be properly developed. When we finally signed the deal, I felt both elated and strangely hollow. I had achieved what my father would consider legitimate success, but on my terms, in my field, without his connections or approval. After taxes and honoring our agreements with early supporters, Jason and I each walked away with just over $94 million. We celebrated with a private dinner, reminiscing about our journey from that tiny apartment to this life-changing moment. "What will you do now?" Jason asked as we finished our meal. "Buy a mansion? Travel the world?" I considered the question carefully. "I think I'll keep things mostly the same for now," I said finally. "I want to be strategic about next steps. And, honestly, I'm not ready to tell my family yet." Jason understood immediately. "You want to see if they'll ever value what you've built without knowing about the money." "Exactly," I nodded. "The moment they know about the acquisition, everything will change. And I'm not sure I want that yet." So I made a decision that would later prove fateful. I kept the acquisition quiet. Outside of our company and the necessary financial professionals, no one knew about my newfound wealth. I invested wisely, donated anonymously to causes I cared about, and continued living modestly. I took a consulting role with Securitech that allowed me to continue working with our technology while giving me more freedom. To my family, it appeared I had simply moved to a new position at a larger company, a lateral move at best in their estimation. As the months passed, I waited for someone in my family to ask meaningful questions about my work or show genuine interest in my life. They never did. Instead, the pattern of dismissal continued, setting the stage for the confrontation that had been brewing for 28 years. In the year following the acquisition, I maintained what appeared to be a middle-class lifestyle while secretly managing a fortune. My one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge was comfortable but deliberately ordinary. I drove a reliable but unflashy car, wore simple, quality clothing without designer labels, and continued working regular hours at my consulting position with Securitech. To anyone observing my daily routine, including my family, I seemed to be doing modestly well, but certainly not thriving by Mason standards. Behind the scenes, my life had transformed dramatically. My investment portfolio grew under expert management. I established a foundation focused on supporting young women in STEM, operating anonymously as its benefactor. I made careful real estate investments through LLCs that couldn't be traced back to me. I even purchased a lakeside cabin in Vermont where I could escape when the pressure of maintaining appearances became too much. My decision to conceal my wealth from my family wasn't made lightly. Part of me hoped that without the distraction of money, they might finally see me, Haley the person, not Haley the disappointment. I wanted them to ask about my work because they were interested, not because they suspected it was lucrative. I wanted connection based on who I was, not what I had. This experiment in authenticity was put to the test every time I returned home for family gatherings, which had become increasingly uncomfortable. During a 4th of July barbecue at my parents' home, my father cornered me by the pool, drink in hand. "So, still at that security company?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was making obligatory conversation. "Yes, still at Securitech," I replied. "We're developing some interesting new protocols for financial institutions." He nodded absently, his eyes already drifting toward Tyler, who was holding court with my father's business associates by the grill. "That's nice. Say, have you thought any more about that position at Meridian Bank? James Patterson's son-in-law is the VP there. Could be a real opportunity to finally get your career on track." I took a slow breath. "Dad, I'm not interested in banking. I'm good at what I do, and I enjoy it." He patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Enjoying your work is a luxury, Haley. Real success means sacrifice. Look at your brother. He puts in 80-hour weeks, but he's already been promoted twice. That's commitment to excellence. Before I could respond, my mother appeared, cocktail in hand. Haley, darling, come meet the Henderson's son. He's a lawyer with Brinkman and Wallace. 32 and already on partner track. Her voice dropped to a stage whisper. And single. Wouldn't hurt to make an impression. You're not getting any younger, dear. These interactions played out in various forms at every family event. At Brooke's birthday dinner, she proudly displayed the keys to her new Mercedes, another gift from our parents. Don't worry, Haley, she said with faux sympathy when she caught me admiring it. Maybe next year you can upgrade from that Honda if you get a real job. During a weekend at my parents' Cape Cod summer home, I overheard my uncle asking my father about his children's careers. Dad spoke at length about Tyler's rapid ascent in finance and Brooke's successful interior design business, heavily subsidized by our parents' connections. When he got to me, his description was tellingly brief. Haley's still finding her way. Something with computers. Even my grandmother, who had always been kinder than most, reflected the family's values. Such a smart girl, she said during one holiday, patting my hand. But intelligence isn't everything, dear. Your cousin Jessica was just average in school, but she married that wonderful surgeon. Now she has that beautiful house in Beacon Hill and sits on 3 charity boards. The consistent message was clear. In the Mason family, success meant visible wealth, status-appropriate marriage, and maintaining appearances. My chosen path held no value in their estimation. What they didn't know, what I couldn't bring myself to tell them yet, was that I had quietly become the family's most financially successful member. Tyler's 6-figure salary and year-end bonuses paled in comparison to the interest alone on my investments. Brooke's design business, which catered to wealthy clients through our parents' social connections, generated revenue that amounted to a rounding error on my quarterly returns. The irony grew even sharper when I discovered, through casual conversation with my financial advisor, that my father's investment firm had been underperforming for years. Mason Investment Group? They've been losing market share to more innovative firms, my advisor commented when the name came up. Word is they're over-leveraged on some commercial properties. Old school thinking in a new market. This information cast my father's persistent career advice in a new light. Was his insistence that I join a respectable firm more about his need to maintain appearances than actual concern for my future? The dynamic reached a new level of absurdity when my parents began asking for small loans to help with various expenses. My mother called one afternoon, her voice casual but calculated. Darling, I know you must be doing well enough at that tech company. Your father and I are a bit stretched this quarter with the renovations on the Cape House. Could you help out with $5,000 for the new landscaping? We'd pay you back, of course. I sent the money, curious where this would lead. It led to more requests. $3,000 for a country club membership renewal, $7,500 for a temporary cash flow issue, with Tyler's condo purchase, $10,000 for Brooke's business expansion. None were repaid, and all came with the unspoken expectation that this was my duty as a family member, despite being the supposedly least successful one. Through my wealth management team, I discreetly investigated the family finances and discovered troubling patterns. My father's business was indeed struggling, over-leveraged on risky investments that weren't paying off. My parents had remortgaged their primary residence to maintain their lifestyle and cover losses. Tyler, despite his prestigious title, was deeply in debt from trying to maintain a banker's lifestyle on an associate's salary. Brooke's design business was operating in the red, sustained by parental subsidies. The most shocking discovery was that my father had been borrowing substantial sums from extended family members, his brothers, my mother's sister, even my grandmother, with increasingly unlikely promises of high returns. The Mason family's perceived prosperity was a carefully maintained facade, cracking under financial strain. I set up anonymous accounts to cover some family expenses, paying off my grandmother's mortgage through a bank error in her favor, establishing a scholarship that conveniently covered my cousin's college tuition, even arranging for my parents' property taxes to be reassessed at a lower rate. all while maintaining the appearance of my modest life and listening to their condescension about my career choices. The emotional toll of this double life grew heavier. In therapy, the one luxury I permitted myself that my family would never know about, I struggled with conflicting desires, to be recognized for my achievements and to be loved simply for who I was. "What are you really testing?" my therapist asked during one session. "Whether they'll love you without the money, or whether they're capable of loving the real you at all?" I had no answer, but as another Thanksgiving approached, I would soon find out. The annual Mason family Thanksgiving dinner was the centerpiece of our family traditions, a showcase of prosperity and status. Each year, my parents invited extended family and select friends to display the family's success and solidarity. Each year, I braced myself for the familiar pattern of subtle dismissals and backhanded compliments. This year would be different, though I didn't know it yet. As I packed an overnight bag for the trip to my parents' home, I had no idea I was heading toward the confrontation that would finally break open the family's carefully constructed reality and my own. Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and cold, the kind of crisp New England morning that normally would have lifted my spirits. I pulled up to my parents' sprawling colonial home in Wellesley, the driveway already filled with luxury vehicles, my father's Jaguar, my mother's Range Rover, Tyler's BMW, and various cars belonging to extended family members. My reliable Honda looked conspicuously out of place among them, which I knew was exactly how my family viewed me. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the bottle of wine I'd brought, a rare vintage that cost more than most people's monthly rent, though the label was understated enough that my family would almost certainly miss its significance, and headed toward the imposing front door with its seasonal wreath. Inside, the house hummed with pre-dinner activity. The professional caterers my mother always hired were arranging appetizers on silver platters. The interior had been decorated to magazine perfection: autumn floral arrangements, tasteful gourds, and the fine china and crystal that only appeared for special occasions. My mother had often remarked that presentation matters more than the food itself, a philosophy that seemed to extend to people in her world as well. "Haley, you made it," my mother greeted me with an air kiss near each cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. She wore an expensive cashmere sweater in a seasonal burnt orange, her blonde highlights fresh, her jewelry understated but clearly valuable. She took the wine with a cursory glance. "How thoughtful. I'll have Marta put this with the others." Before I could mention the wine's pedigree, she was already directing me toward the great room where family had gathered. "Everyone's here already. Your cousin Jennifer just got engaged to that wonderful surgeon from Boston General. Do try to mingle, darling." The great room was filled with relatives performing the annual ritual of competitive success stories. Uncle Robert was describing his recent Mediterranean cruise, while Aunt Patricia detailed her son's law school accomplishments. My grandparents held court near the fireplace, receiving updates from various family members eager to impress them. Tyler stood by the bay window with a group of male relatives and family friends, gesturing emphatically as he described some business deal. At 32, he had our father's commanding presence and our mother's social polish, his designer suit fitting perfectly, his expression confident as he commanded attention. "The acquisition closes next quarter," he was saying. "The board practically begged me to lead the transition team. Youngest VP in the firm's history to handle a merger of this size." Nearby, Brooke was surrounded by female relatives admiring her 3-carat engagement ring. At 26, she had recently become engaged to Christopher Whitman, heir to a commercial real estate fortune and, according to my mother, exactly the kind of connection this family needs. "The wedding planner worked with the Astors last year," Brooke was explaining. "We've reserved the botanical gardens for June. The guest list is already at 300, but Daddy says we can't cut corners on an event of this importance." I moved through the room, exchanging polite greetings with relatives who regarded me with varying degrees of curiosity and pity. Cousin Jennifer, fresh from announcing her engagement, caught me by the appetizer table. "Haley, it's been ages," she said, conspicuously displaying her engagement ring. "Still working with computers, was it?" That's so dedicated of you. Cybersecurity, I corrected gently. Congratulations on your engagement. Thanks. Richard is chief of neurosurgery. We're looking at properties in Beacon Hill. She lowered her voice to a confidential tone. I heard you're still single? My Richard has a friend in IT at the hospital. Not a doctor, of course, but he seems nice. Very stable job. This well-meaning condescension continued as I made my way around the room. Uncle Stephen asked if I had considered going back for an MBA to get a real career started. Aunt Patricia wondered if my company offered good benefits at least, since the salary in those technical jobs can't be much. My grandmother patted my hand and said, "Some people bloom later in life, dear. Look at your cousin Michael. Didn't find his footing until nearly 40, and now he manages that wonderful sporting goods store." I maintained my composure through these interactions, sipping sparingly from a glass of champagne and reminding myself that their opinions couldn't diminish my actual accomplishments. Still, each dismissive comment stung, reinforcing the lifetime of feeling undervalued and misunderstood. My father made his entrance as dinner was about to be served, commanding the room's attention without effort. At 60, Richard Mason remained imposing, tall, distinguished, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to deference. He greeted family members with practiced charm, saving his warmest welcomes for those with the most impressive titles or connections. When he reached me, his greeting was perfunctory. "Haley, glad you could make it." His eyes were already scanning the room for the next, more important conversation. "Thanks, Dad. How's business?" I asked, genuinely curious given what I now knew about his financial situation. A flash of something annoyance? Worry? Crossed his face before the confident mask returned. Expanding. We're positioned for a strong quarter. Speaking of business, have you reconsidered that banking position? The offer won't stay open forever. Before I could respond, the dinner bell rang, saving me from another conversation about my disappointing career choices. The dining room was a showcase of traditional elegance. The long mahogany table extended to its full length, seating 24 comfortably. Place cards positioned family members strategically, with my father at the head, my mother at the foot, and the most accomplished relatives and friends nearest to them. I found my place card near the middle, between my mother's cousin's son, a dental student, and my father's college roommate's daughter, a pharmaceutical sales representative. The table's middle-class section. As the first course was served, a butternut squash soup that probably cost more per bowl than I used to spend on daily meals during my startup days, my father stood to offer the traditional Thanksgiving toast. These annual speeches typically followed a pattern, expressions of gratitude for the family's accomplishments, with particular emphasis on recent successes, followed by aspirational comments about the coming year. "Family and friends," he began, raising his crystal glass of expensive Bordeaux, another year of achievement for the Masons. "I'm grateful for continued success at Mason Investment Group despite challenging markets. Tyler has distinguished himself with his work on the Westridge merger, the youngest vice president in the firm's history to lead such a significant acquisition." Approving murmurs circled the table as Tyler accepted the praise with practiced humility. Brooke has not only expanded her design business to include 3 of Boston's most prestigious addresses, but has also secured her own future by accepting Christopher Whitman's proposal. The Whitman-Mason union represents exactly the kind of strategic alliance that strengthens families. Brooke beamed as relatives admired her ring again. My father continued, acknowledging various relatives' accomplishments: my cousin's medical residency, my uncle's new yacht, my aunt's chairmanship of a hospital charity board. He spoke at length about my grandfather's business legacy and my mother's successful chairmanship of the Symphony Gala. I waited for my name, for some acknowledgement of my work or contribution to the family. It never came. As my father concluded his toast with, "To the continued prosperity and success of the Mason family, upholding our values of excellence and achievement," I realized I had been completely omitted from the family narrative. The slight was so obvious that I noticed uncomfortable glances from several relatives. My dental student table neighbor whispered, "Tough break," before turning his attention to the soup. Something shifted inside me at that moment, a lifetime of accumulated patience and understanding suddenly exhausted. I had built a revolutionary company, changed an industry, achieved financial success beyond anyone at this table, all while being treated as the family disappointment. I had quietly supported family members who simultaneously looked down on me. I had maintained a facade of modesty while testing whether my family could ever value me for myself. The answer was now painfully clear. As the main course was served, an elaborate display of heritage turkey and gourmet sides, the conversation turned to Tyler's recent bonus and Brooke's wedding budget. My father was explaining the importance of maintaining appearances even when times are tight when I found myself speaking. "I sold my company last year for $188 million. The statement dropped into a momentary lull in conversation, causing an immediate and absolute silence around the table. 24 pairs of eyes turned toward me in various states of confusion and disbelief. My father recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to dismissive amusement. "Haley, this isn't the time for jokes. We're discussing serious family matters." "I'm not joking," I replied, my voice steady. SecureFlow, the cybersecurity company I co-founded, was acquired by Securitech Global. After taxes and distributing shares to our team, I personally netted $94 million. Another beat of silence, then nervous laughter from several relatives. My mother forced a tight smile. "Darling, we know you're doing fine in your technical job. There's no need for exaggeration." Tyler snorted into his wine glass. "Right. Because Silicon Valley is just throwing around 9-figure deals for little security apps. What did you really get? A nice bonus? Company car?" The condescension in his tone, so familiar, so expected, somehow hurt more than outright disbelief would have. I reached for my phone, pulled up my investment portfolio summary, and slid it toward my father. "This is my current net worth, excluding real estate holdings and my charitable foundation. You can verify every detail." The acquisition was reported in the Wall Street Journal, though my name wasn't prominently featured since I preferred to remain private about my wealth. My father glanced at the phone, his expression freezing as he processed the numbers on the screen. For once in his life, Richard Mason was speechless. That can't be right," he finally managed, but the uncertainty in his voice was telling. "It's not only right, it's actually conservative," I continued, a lifetime of suppressed feelings finally breaking through. "I've been living modestly by choice, not necessity. Meanwhile, I've discovered that this family's finances aren't nearly as robust as everyone pretends. Dad's business has been struggling for years. This house has 2 mortgages. Tyler's successful career comes with crushing debt. Brooke's business operates at a loss." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the table. My mother's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. Tyler's expression darkened dangerously. "How dare you," my father said, his voice low and threatening. "You have no right to discuss private family finances." "I have every right," I countered, considering I've been anonymously supporting this family for months. Who do you think mysteriously paid off Grandma's mortgage? Or covered Tyler's margin call last quarter when his investments tanked? Or quietly funded the anonymous donor who saved Brooke's business from bankruptcy? The silence that followed was deafening. My revelations had cracked the carefully maintained facade of Mason family prosperity, exposing the financial struggles they'd worked so hard to hide from each other and the world. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "That's enough," he thundered, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the crystal water glasses jump. "I will not have you spreading lies and causing discord at my Thanksgiving table. If you can't support this family's values, perhaps you shouldn't be at this table at all." "Dad," Brooke interjected, her voice uncertain. "Maybe we should listen." "No," he cut her off. "I know my own business. I know this family's finances. Haley has always needed attention, always felt she had something to prove. But this performance crosses a line." He turned to me, years of disappointment hardening his gaze. "Either apologize for this disruption and these false accusations, or leave. In that moment, looking at my father's unyielding expression, I saw with perfect clarity that he would rather lose me than face the truth. My wealth, my success, none of it mattered if it didn't conform to his vision of achievement. My mother's silent complicity, Tyler's smug certainty, the uncomfortable expressions around the table, all confirmed what I had suspected for years. I would never be valued for who I actually was in this family. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my barely touched plate. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said quietly. "I'll go." As I walked toward the door, I heard whispered arguments breaking out behind me. My grandmother called my name. Brooke half rose from her seat before my mother pulled her back down. No one else moved to stop me. In the grand foyer, I collected my coat from the hall closet, hands steady despite the emotional earthquake I'd just experienced. As I reached for the door, my father appeared behind me. "You've always been difficult, Haley," he said, his voice controlled but seething with anger. "But this attention-seeking behavior is beneath even you. When you're ready to be a proper part of this family and accept your place in it, you can return." I looked at him, really looked at the man who had shaped so much of my self-doubt despite my objective success, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. "My place?" I echoed. "Dad, I've built something significant on my own terms. I've achieved exactly what you always claimed to value: financial success, independence, innovation. But because it didn't happen your way, in your industry, with your approval, it doesn't count." I opened the door, letting in a gust of cold November air. "I hope someday you can be proud of me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be. But I'm done waiting for that day to come." As I walked to my car, the unassuming Honda that had been part of my cover, I made a decision. By morning, my family would understand exactly what they had done. The anonymous financial support that had been quietly sustaining their lifestyle was about to disappear. The drive from my parents' house back to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and swirling emotions. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and despite the car's heater running at full blast, I felt chilled to the bone. The family dinner I'd just fled kept replaying in my mind: my father's dismissal, my mother's silent complicity, the shocked faces around the table. I had finally done it. After years of quiet achievement and patient understanding, I had shattered the family mythology. The fallout would be significant, but I couldn't bring myself to regret my actions. Some truths needed to be spoken, even if they destroyed carefully maintained illusions. When I reached my apartment, I bypassed the modest one-bedroom unit I maintained for appearances and took the private elevator to the penthouse I actually owned, a spacious, beautifully appointed space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. Here, away from judgmental eyes, I allowed myself to live in accordance with my actual means, though still with far more restraint than my family would have shown with similar resources. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of the same rare vintage I'd brought to dinner. Keeping a case for myself had been a small indulgence, and called the one person who would understand the magnitude of what had just happened. "You finally told them," Jason said when I finished recounting the evening. My former business partner and the only person who knew both my financial status and family dynamics immediately grasped the significance. I did. And I got kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner for my trouble. How did it feel? Telling the truth after all this time? I considered the question, watching city lights twinkle below. Terrifying. Liberating. Sad. All at once. "And what now?" he asked, cutting to the heart of the matter as he always did. "Now," I said, resolution forming, "I stop enabling their delusions. It's time for some financial reality to match the truth I've spoken." After ending the call, I opened my laptop and composed an email to my financial advisor, Jonathan Wells. Despite the holiday, he responded within minutes to my urgent message. "This is substantial," he said when we connected on a video call. "You're talking about unwinding multiple support structures you've put in place for your family members. Are you certain about this decision?" "I am," I confirmed. "Not as punishment, but as necessity. My family has been living beyond their means, hiding financial problems from each other and maintaining appearances at all costs. I've been enabling that by anonymously covering gaps. It needs to stop, for their sake as much as mine. Over the next 2 hours, Jonathan and I systematically reviewed and modified the various financial arrangements I had established to support my family. The monthly transfers to my parents' household account, which they believed were error deposits they had cleverly hidden from the bank, would cease immediately. The anonymous donor fund that had been quietly covering my brother Tyler's margin calls and credit card minimums would be closed. The arts grant that supplemented my sister Brooke's design business would be terminated with a final 30-day payment. The family trust one had established to cover my grandmother's medical expenses would continue. She was innocent in this family drama, but would be restructured to pay providers directly rather than through my father's management. By midnight, the financial safety net I had spun beneath my struggling family had been systematically dismantled. They would not immediately understand what had happened or why certain automatic payments and mysterious financial windfalls had suddenly stopped, but the effects would become apparent within days. "There's one more thing," I told Jonathan as we prepared to conclude our call. "I want a complete audit of my father's business dealings involving family members. I have reason to believe he's been borrowing extensively from relatives with promises of returns he can't deliver." Jonathan's expression turned serious. "If you're suggesting what I think you are, that moves beyond family drama into potential securities violations, depending on how he structured these loans." "I know. That's why I need complete information before deciding next steps." Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my penthouse, alternating between certainty that I had done the right thing and waves of guilt about the chaos I had unleashed. The conditioning of a lifetime: put family first, maintain appearances, never air dirty laundry, warred with my adult understanding that those values had enabled dysfunction and denied authentic connection. Morning brought no clarity, only the certainty that events had been set in motion that couldn't be reversed. I silenced my phone after the 20th missed call from various family members and threw myself into work, reviewing security protocols for Securiteca's newest clients with an intensity that made my colleagues exchange concerned glances. It took exactly 3 days for the financial reality to hit my family. 3 days of ignored calls and messages with increasingly desperate tones. 3 days of reports from Jonathan as various automatic payments failed and accounts registered insufficient funds. On the 4th day, the preliminary audit results arrived, confirming my worst suspicions. My father had indeed been borrowing substantial sums from family members, his brothers, my mother's sister, even my grandmother, with increasingly unlikely promises of high returns. The Mason Investment Group was leveraged far beyond prudent limits, and the exclusive investment opportunities he had offered relatives were little more than a shell game, using new investments to pay returns on older ones while maintaining the illusion of profitability. It wasn't technically a Ponzi scheme, Jonathan explained, but operated in the gray area just short of illegal, unethical certainly, and devastating to the family members who had trusted their financial security to my father's reputation. This discovery hardened my resolve. What I had initially seen as simple status-seeking and dismissiveness now appeared as something more sinister. My father hadn't just undervalued me. He had potentially been counting on me, the family underachiever, to eventually come around and inject capital into a struggling enterprise, perhaps after I finally got a real job at his recommendation. The texts and voicemails from family members told the unfolding story of financial chaos. From my mother, initially indignant: "Your father is very upset about your behavior. Call immediately." Then increasingly concerned: "There seems to be some issue with the household accounts. Call me." From Tyler, aggressive then panicked: "Whatever game you're playing stops now." Later: "My cards are all declining. What did you do?" From Brooke, confused then tearful: "Mom and Dad are fighting constantly. Please call back." From various relatives, questions about investments with my father and concerned inquiries about my welfare after the Thanksgiving incident. On day 5, my father's business partner, William Hayes, contacted me directly, a significant development as he had barely acknowledged my existence at family events over the years. "Haley, we need to talk," he said when I finally answered. "Richard isn't himself. The firm is facing challenges." He mentioned you might have resources that could help stabilize the situation. Did he explain how I might have come by these resources? I asked. Hayes hesitated. He said something about your tech job paying off better than expected. Look, the details aren't important. What matters is this is your family's legacy at stake. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Even now, my father couldn't bring himself to acknowledge the truth of my success to his business partner. I was still just the daughter with a tech job who might mysteriously have funds to bail out the family firm. I'll consider the situation, I said neutrally, but I'll need complete financial transparency before discussing any form of assistance. By the end of the week, family chaos had reached fever pitch. My grandmother called, her voice shaking, to tell me that my parents were having a serious disagreement and my father had moved to a hotel. Brooke reported that her wedding venue had called about a returned deposit check. Tyler's girlfriend had apparently moved out after discovering his financial situation wasn't what he'd claimed. The family emergency meeting was inevitable. It was called for Sunday afternoon at my parents' home, organized by my Aunt Patricia, who had assumed the role of family mediator. The text announcement was carefully worded to focus on recent family concerns and ensuring mutual support during challenging times, avoiding direct mention of financial issues or my Thanksgiving revelations. I wasn't explicitly invited, having been unofficially excommunicated by my father's decree, but my grandmother's separate message made it clear my presence was expected by at least some family members. After careful consideration, I decided to attend, not to gloat or punish, but to finally establish truth as the foundation for any future relationship with my family. I would bring documentation, proof of SecureFlow's acquisition, records of the financial support I had provided, and the audit findings about my father's business practices. The truth would be difficult for everyone to hear, but continuing to live in carefully constructed fiction had caused too much damage already. Whatever came next, reconciliation or permanent estrangement, would at least be based in reality. As I prepared for the confrontation ahead, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. For the first time in my adult life, I would be entering a family gathering as my authentic self, not the overlooked middle child, not the family disappointment, not the secretly wealthy benefactor, just Haley Mason, with all my accomplishments and flaws in plain view. It was time for the Mason family to finally see me clearly, and for me to see them clearly in return. The atmosphere in my parents' living room that Sunday afternoon was unlike any previous family gathering. Gone were the carefully curated cheese platters, the decorative seasonal touches, the gentle classical music that typically formed the backdrop to family events. Instead, tension hung in the air like a physical presence. Family members sat in tense clusters, conversations dropping to whispers when others approached. I arrived precisely at the designated time, neither early to accommodate family politics nor late to make a statement. I wore a simple but well-tailored navy suit, professional, understated, but unmistakably expensive to the discerning eye. The slim briefcase I carried contained all the documentation I had prepared: acquisition papers, financial records, audit results. My entrance created an immediate ripple effect through the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. My mother, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, half rose from her seat then sank back down. My sister Brooke rushed toward me with visible relief, while Tyler glowered from across the room. My father was notably absent. "You came," Brooke said, embracing me with unexpected warmth. Up close, I could see the strain of the past week in her reddened eyes and the tension around her mouth. "Everything's falling apart, Haley." Before I could respond, my Aunt Patricia approached, assuming her self-appointed role as mediator. "Haley, we didn't know if you'd join us, given recent events." Her tone was carefully neutral, though her eyes kept darting to my briefcase with undisguised curiosity. "I thought it was important to be here," I replied simply. "Where's Dad?" "In his study," my mother answered, approaching with visible hesitation. Gone was her usual perfect appearance. Her hair lacked its usual styled precision, her clothing was expensive but rumpled, and her makeup couldn't fully conceal her exhaustion. "He's reviewing some papers before joining us." The The subtext was clear. My father was avoiding the initial confrontation, perhaps preparing his own defense or explanation. My grandmother beckoned me to the seat beside her on the sofa, patting my hand when I joined her. "I always knew you were special, dear," she whispered, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. Though I admit, I never imagined quite how special. The room gradually reorganized itself around my presence, family members positioning themselves based on their alignment in the unfolding drama. My mother's siblings gathered protectively around her. My father's brothers stood near the study door, expressions grim. Cousins and more distant relatives arranged themselves along the periphery, unwilling to miss the family spectacle, but hesitant to claim clear allegiance. After 15 minutes of uncomfortable small talk and transparent attempts to extract information from me, my father finally emerged from his study. Richard Mason had always been an imposing figure, using his height, immaculate appearance, and commanding voice to dominate rooms and conversations. The man who entered now retained the physical attributes, but had somehow diminished. His posture lacked its usual authority. His eyes held a wariness I'd never seen before, and the hand that clutched a folder of documents had a barely perceptible tremor. Our eyes met across the room in a moment of silent recognition. For perhaps the first time in my life, my father saw me, not as his disappointing middle child, but as an equal player in the unfolding family drama, possibly even the one holding the stronger position. "Let's get started," he said, his voice betraying none of the uncertainty his appearance suggested. "We have family matters to discuss." Aunt Patricia took charge, outlining the purpose of the meeting in carefully diplomatic terms. "Recent events have created some confusion about the family's financial situation. We're here to clarify misunderstandings and determine how to move forward united as a family." The framing was so sanitized that I nearly laughed. Confusion and misunderstandings hardly captured the deliberate deceptions and painful revelations of the past week. But I remained silent, waiting for the right moment to present my evidence. My father spoke next, addressing the room with a shadow of his usual authority. "I know many of you have questions about Mason Investment Group and various family financial arrangements. I want to assure everyone that despite some temporary cash flow issues, the firm remains fundamentally sound. These challenges are simply part of the natural market cycle." He continued with a well-practiced speech about weathering economic storms and temporary adjustments, skillfully avoiding specifics while projecting confidence. It was the same technique I'd seen him employ at countless dinner parties and family gatherings, speaking with such certainty that questioning him seemed almost impolite. "What about the investment returns you promised last quarter?" my Uncle Robert finally interrupted. My statement showed significant losses, not the 15% return you guaranteed. "And the beach house purchase you advised me on?" added my mother's sister. "The bank is saying the financing fell through because of credit issues, but I liquidated my retirement account for the down payment based on your guidance." As more relatives began voicing specific concerns, my father's practiced composure began to crack. He referred vaguely to paperwork errors and temporary administrative issues, promises that everything would be sorted out in the coming weeks. Then he played his final card, the one I had anticipated. "Of course, recent family developments may provide an opportunity to accelerate our recovery," he said, his gaze shifting deliberately toward me. "It seems our Haley has had some financial success she's been keeping to herself. Perhaps now would be the time for her to demonstrate family loyalty by helping stabilize the situation." The naked manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Even after everything, he was attempting to reframe my success as a resource for his rescue, my independence as a family obligation. The room's attention shifted to me, expressions ranging from confusion to calculation to hope. This was the moment I had prepared for, not to shame or punish, but to finally establish truth as our baseline. I opened my briefcase and removed the first document, the official acquisition agreement for SecureFlow, with the purchase price highlighted. "Before we discuss family loyalty and obligations," I said, my voice steady as I handed the document to my Aunt Patricia to circulate, "I think we need clarity about what's actually happening." This is the acquisition agreement for the company I co-founded. As you can see, the sale price was $188 million. My personal share after taxes and distributions to our team was $94 million. Murmurs spread through the room as the document was passed from hand to hand, the highlighted figures causing widened eyes and shocked expressions. This next document, I continued, removing a bound financial report, is an independent audit of Mason Investment Group conducted this week by Deloitte at my request. It shows that the firm has been operating at a significant loss for the past 3 years, with client investments used to cover operating expenses and family withdrawals. My father's face flushed with anger. You had no right to investigate my business. Those records are private. Not when they involve family members' investments, I countered calmly. Not when you've been using my grandmother's retirement funds to cover your country club membership. This revelation caused a fresh wave of shocked murmurs. My grandmother's hand tightened around mine. I produced more documents. Records of the anonymous financial support I had provided to various family members, the manipulative requests for loans that were never intended to be repaid, evidence of my parents' mortgage defaults that I had quietly covered. For the past year, I explained to the stunned room, I've been anonymously supporting many of you financially while being treated as the family failure. I did this because despite everything, I care about this family. But I can't continue enabling a system built on appearances, deception, and status rather than genuine connection and truth. So you're cutting us off as punishment, my mother interjected, finding her voice. Because we didn't praise you enough? No, I said gently. I'm establishing boundaries and reality. I'm happy to help family members who truly need support, grandma's medical expenses, legitimate education costs for cousins, even emergency assistance in true crises. But I won't fund luxury lifestyles, status competitions, or dad's failing business ventures while being treated as somehow less valuable than everyone else in this room. Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly erupted. This is rich coming from you. You sit on your millions in secret, judging us, playing some twisted game to test if we're worthy of knowing about your success. How is that not manipulative? His question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. You're right, I acknowledged after a moment. Keeping my success secret was partly a test I desperately wanted this family to pass. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I have. That was unfair, and I own that mistake. This admission seemed to shift something in the room's atmosphere. My candor had introduced a new element to the family dynamic, vulnerability paired with accountability, that felt foreign in the Mason household. My father, however, was not ready to concede his position. This performance is all very dramatic, Haley, but it doesn't change the reality of our situation. The family business, the legacy your grandfather built, is at risk. Whatever grievances you think you have about not getting enough attention growing up, surely you don't want to be responsible for destroying generations of work. It was his final attempt at manipulation, invoking family legacy and placing the burden of his failures on my shoulders. In the past, it might have worked. The Haley who desperately sought her father's approval might have yielded. But that Haley was gone. The legacy is already destroyed. Dad, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You did that when you started using family funds as your personal ATM, when you prioritized appearances over truth, when you taught us that our value was tied to external markers of success rather than character or genuine achievement. I turned to address the entire room. I'm willing to help establish a family fund with reasonable oversight and transparent management, not controlled by any single family member, to address legitimate needs and education costs. I'm willing to help those who want to start fresh with clear boundaries and expectations. But I'm not writing blank checks for anyone, and I'm not investing in businesses or lifestyles built on deception. The next 2 hours were chaotic, emotional, and occasionally ugly as family members processed these revelations. Alliances shifted visibly as relatives calculated their positions in the new family order. Some approached me with tearful apologies and sudden recognition of my amazing business acumen. Others huddled with my father, shooting me resentful glances. My mother vacillated between anger at my public exposure of family secrets and strategic consideration of her options now that her husband's financial house of cards had collapsed. "I always encouraged your education," she said at one point, a transparent attempt to rewrite history that I let pass without comment. Brooke surprised me by publicly breaking from our parents' position. "Haley's right," she announced, removing her enormous engagement ring. "This whole family is built on appearances. I don't even love Christopher. I just knew he would make Mom and Dad happy. I'm done living for their approval." Tyler maintained his anger longest, his identity most closely tied to the family mythology I had shattered. But even he eventually approached me as the gathering was breaking up. "I still think how you did this was wrong," he said stiffly. "But I can't deny the business is in trouble. Has been for years. Dad kept saying we just needed to maintain confidence until the market turned around." "And you believed him because that's what we were all trained to do," I replied, seeing my brother clearly perhaps for the first time, not as the golden child, but as another victim of our father's value system. By evening's end, the family had fractured into new configurations. My father remained unrepentant, retreating to study and refusing further discussion. Several relatives were exploring legal options regarding their investments. Others were processing their own complicity in the family's toxic dynamics. As I prepared to leave, my grandmother pulled me aside. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," she said quietly. "Not because of the money. He never cared much for that despite what your father claims. But because you had the courage to speak truth, even when it was painful." I drove away from my childhood home that evening with no illusions about easy resolutions or fairy tale reconciliations. Some relationships might be permanently damaged. Others might eventually transform into healthier connections. The family would never be the same, and that was necessary, even if painful. What I felt most strongly as I left the Mason family estate was not triumph or vindication, but something quieter and more profound. The lightness that comes with finally setting down a burden carried too long. For the first time in my life, I had shown my full self to my family, strengths, flaws, boundaries, and all, and while the aftermath was messy and uncertain, it was finally, refreshingly real. 6 months after the family confrontation that appended generations of Mason family dynamics, I stood on the back deck of my Vermont lake house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of amber and gold. The property, 3 acres of woodland surrounding a modern yet cozy home with panoramic views, had been my sanctuary during the months of family upheaval that followed Thanksgiving. Here, 2 hours from Boston and the family drama, I had created a space that reflected my true self. Comfortable but not ostentatious, technologically cutting-edge yet warm and inviting. The lake house represented more than just a retreat. It symbolized my commitment to living authentically. Unlike my parents' showpiece homes designed to impress visitors, this place was built around my actual preferences and needs. A professional-grade kitchen for my rediscovered love of cooking, an advanced home office for remote work, spaces designed for both solitude and entertaining the people who truly mattered in my life. Dr. Miranda Chin, my therapist of 3 years, had helped me recognize the significance of creating physical spaces that reflected my values rather than family expectations. "Your relationship with material possessions is evolving in a healthy way," she had noted in our session the previous week. "You're neither rejecting wealth out of rebellion nor embracing it as validation. You're simply using resources in alignment with your authentic self." The journey to this healthier perspective hadn't been straightforward. In the immediate aftermath of the family confrontation, I had swung between vindication and guilt, between relief at speaking my truth and anxiety about the consequences. Weekly therapy sessions had been crucial in processing these complex emotions and establishing a framework for moving forward. Boundaries aren't punishment, Dr. Chin had reminded me repeatedly. They're the foundation of healthy relationships. You can love your family while still requiring respect and honesty. This principle had guided my selective reconnection with family members who demonstrated genuine remorse and a desire for authentic relationship. My grandmother had been the first and easiest reconnection. At 84, Elizabeth Mason possessed a clarity and wisdom that younger generations of Masons had ignored in their pursuit of status and appearance. "I watched your father turn Robert's business into a status competition," she told me during one of our regular Sunday afternoon tea sessions. "Your grandfather built that company to support the family, not to be the family's identity." Richard never understood the difference. My sister Brooke had surprised everyone with her capacity for change. After the family meeting, she had not only broken her engagement to Christopher Whitman, but had moved out of her luxury condo into a modest apartment, enrolled in community college classes in early childhood education, and begun volunteering at a local women's shelter. "I've been playing a part my whole life," she confessed during our first tentative lunch after the confrontation. "Mom's mini-me, the family beauty, the perfect socialite. I don't even know who I actually am or what I really want." Our relationship had transformed from distant, competitive siblings to something approaching genuine friendship. We now met weekly for coffee, navigating our new dynamic with cautious optimism. I had offered to fund her education, but was proud when she instead requested a job at my foundation, wanting to earn her way rather than simply receive financial support. "I watched you build something real," she explained. "I want that feeling too, even if my path looks different." Tyler's journey had been more complicated. His identity had been so thoroughly entwined with our father's value system that the revelations had triggered a genuine existential crisis. After initially doubling down on resentment and accusations, he had disappeared to a wellness retreat in Arizona, returning 3 months later with a humility I'd never witnessed in my confident older brother. "I don't know how to exist in a world where everything I valued turns out to be meaningless," he admitted during a tense but honest dinner at my Cambridge apartment. "My whole life was about chasing Dad's definition of success." Our relationship remained tentative, but I recognized in Tyler's confusion my own earlier struggles to define success on my terms. I had offered not financial support, but something potentially more valuable: connections to career counselors and identity coaches who specialized in helping people align careers with authentic values. My relationship with our mother had developed into a careful détente. Diane Mason had built her entire identity around being the perfect corporate wife and social manager. With my father's business collapse and their subsequent separation, she had lost not just financial security, but her sense of purpose and position. Our monthly lunches were exercises in careful navigation, her instinct to revert to superficial social niceties battling with tentative attempts at genuine connection. She had agreed to therapy, partly at my suggestion and partly because her social circle had contracted significantly following the family's financial scandal. "I don't know how to be just Diane," she confessed during a rare moment of candor. "I've been Mrs. Richard Mason for so long." Watching my mother struggle to reconstruct her identity at 62 was both painful and illuminating. Her journey reinforced my determination to build a life based on authentic connections rather than external validation. My father remained the most distant family relationship. Richard Mason had retreated to a smaller home outside Boston, running what remained of Mason Investment Group with a skeleton staff. He had lost his position on various prestigious boards and his membership in the exclusive clubs that had defined his social identity for decades. Our only direct contact had been a terse business meeting with attorneys present to formalize the separation of family finances and establish the independent family foundation I had created. He had aged visibly in the months since Thanksgiving, his trademark confidence replaced by a brittle defensiveness. "I built everything I had for this family," he had stated as the meeting concluded, his only acknowledgement of the situation. "Remember that, whatever you think of me." I had responded with the simple truth: "I know you did what you thought was right, Dad. I just needed to do the same." Whether we would ever rebuild a meaningful relationship remained uncertain. I had left the door open, but with clear conditions: respect for my boundaries, acknowledgement of past behaviors, and a willingness to relate as adults rather than through his expectations of parental authority. Beyond family recalibration, these months had been transformative for how I approached my wealth and success. The SecureFlow acquisition had made me wealthy beyond ordinary imagination, But the family drama had clarified that money was simply a tool, powerful but neutral, its impact determined by how it was used. I had established the Mason Technology Access Foundation with a $20 million initial endowment, focused on providing scholarships and mentorship to overlooked tech students from middle and lower-income backgrounds. The foundation specifically sought candidates who, like my younger self, showed promise, but lacked family support or connections. Success shouldn't depend on who believes in you at home, I explained at the foundation's launch event. Sometimes talent needs only opportunity and a single person who sees its potential. My professional life had evolved as well. After completing my contractual consulting period with Securitech, I had begun selectively investing in promising tech startups, with a particular focus on companies founded by women and minorities. Unlike traditional venture capital, my investment approach emphasized sustainable growth over quick returns and founder well-being alongside profit potential. My personal circle had transformed completely. Gone were the obligatory social connections maintained for family appearances. Instead, I had cultivated relationships with people who knew me as Haley the person, not Haley the Mason or Haley the millionaire. Alicia, my college roommate who had first recognized my potential, remained my closest friend. Jason, my SecureFlow co-founder, was a regular presence in my life beyond our continued professional collaboration. I had even begun a promising relationship with Daniel Park, an architectural engineer I'd met through a foundation event who valued my mind and heart far more than my financial status. What I appreciate most about you isn't what you've achieved, impressive as that is, Daniel had said during our third date. It's how you've remained grounded despite everything. That takes a different kind of strength. As the sunset deepened over the lake, casting long shadows across the deck, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. The Thanksgiving confrontation that had seemed so catastrophic had actually been the necessary breaking point, the moment when truth finally overwhelmed the family mythology, painful but ultimately liberating. The Mason family would never return to its previous configuration, and that was not a failure, but a necessary evolution. Some relationships had strengthened through honesty, others had revealed themselves as too rooted in dysfunction to survive authenticity. New connections had formed based on mutual respect rather than obligation or status. My phone chimed with a notification, a reminder about tomorrow's foundation board meeting where we would review the first round of scholarship recipients. Among them was a young woman from rural Michigan whose application essay had brought tears to my eyes. No one in my family understands why I'm obsessed with coding instead of pursuing a real job, she had written. But I know this is where I belong. I smiled, thinking of the opportunity awaiting her and the others, not just financial support, but membership in a community that valued their unique gifts. Whatever challenges they faced with family expectations or societal pressures, they wouldn't face them alone. My own journey was far from complete. Establishing healthy boundaries, living authentically, building relationships based on genuine connection rather than obligation, these were ongoing practices, not destination points. There would be setbacks and difficult days ahead, especially as family dynamics continued to evolve. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I was moving forward as my complete self, neither hiding my achievements nor defining myself solely through them. Success, I had finally understood, wasn't measured by account balances or family approval, but by the courage to live truthfully and the capacity to create meaningful impact. The last light faded from the sky, stars emerging in the clear Vermont night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. For tonight, I allowed myself to simply be present in this moment of hard-won peace, grateful for the difficult journey that had led me here. If my story resonates with you, I hope it encourages you to define success on your own terms and surround yourself with people who value you for who you truly are, not what you have or what role you play in their narrative. Sometimes the most difficult conversations lead to the most necessary growth. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family to protect your authentic self? Share your experience in the comments. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, Please subscribe for more stories of personal transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you, but by the truth you know about yourself.